Now I want to go through the history on how this truth started. 1800, a literate blacksmith named Gabriel Prosser taught the slaves through inspiration of the Bible that we were God's people and should rebel against the tyranny of America. So that drawing right there is an illustration of Gabriel Prosser. That was in the 1800s. Then you had 1831. It says a slave named Nat Turner was called the Prophet. A lot of people don't know that. That was his nickname, the Prophet, because he was always talking about the scriptures, okay, and raised a small slave rebellion based on Bible teachings and visions of war and blood he had. Many blacks today demonize this man who attempted to save them from oppression. Then you had in 1896, William Saunders Crowdy in Lawrence, Kansas. He established the Church of God and Saints of Christ. Although he taught blacks were God's people, he mixed a lot of Christianity in his teaching. You could Google this guy, and it tells you that it was still a lot of Christian stuff in there. Okay, under it, it says, F.S. Cherry set up the Church of the Living God, the pillar ground of truth for all nations. So even with this, he had all nations involved in this. This group was founded in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and later moved to Philadelphia. Theologically, the Church of the Living God mixed elements of Judaism and Christianity and the Talmud. So he had all races in there, so that he was still kind of off too. 1920, you have Wentworth A. Matthews. He established the Commandment Keepers in Harlem, New York. He primarily based his learnings on so-called Jewish people. He rejected all New Testament writings. That was him right there. 1929, you have Israel Ben Newman and Mordecai Herman. They established the Moorish Zionist Temple of the Moorish Jews. They also followed white Jewish teachings, okay? Under that, you're in 1930, you had Arnold Josiah Ford. He and a small group of black Jews went to Ethiopia, where they participated in the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie, created a school, and acquired 800 acres of land for the purpose of uniting black Jews and the diaspora with Ethiopians. He died there in 1935. So he had a little bit of understanding, but not to the point of where we're about to get to. Okay, near the end of the Civil Rights Movement, there were several prominent Israelite teachers. It was around this time the truth was being taught in a larger scale and in more areas. 1960, this is where we branch off from, right here. 1960, you had Eber Ben Yemyan, also known as Abba Bivens. He was initially taught he was an Israelite by an ex-slave some many years earlier in the South. Bivens believed in the Black Christ, and on his way to New York, he had visited many Indian reservations and came to the scriptural conclusion that the so-called Indians were Israelites as well. He then came to New York and joined the Commandment Keepers. That's the group we saw up above with Matthews, under Matthew, but rejected Matthew's teachings of Old Testament only. So they got into an argument and Bivens broke off from him. Bivens founded the Israeli school. He was the first to teach both the blacks and Indians of the Americas, Israelites. So he was the first one that started to teach about the two kingdoms. 1963, you got Ben Carter, also known as Ben Ami. He led 300 Israelites from Chicago to Liberia and then to Dimona, Israel. He established the African Hebrew Israelites. He attempted to deliver his group from the curses of Deuteronomy 28 under the oppressive hand of America, but soon discovered that oppression followed him to Dimona, Israel. Due to lack of citizenship, they lacked the medical and dental capabilities to properly take care of one another. So he agreed to support the Jewish Israeli military, allowing their young men to fight against the Palestinians in exchange for much needed supplies for their camp. He had to sell a soul just to get a few dental benefits and medical benefits to help his people. He got to send a young men in their war. 1965, William A. Lewis taught a congregation in Grand Junction, Michigan. 1970, Hulan Mitchell Jr. This is the one they have on the biography channel, where many of your mothers and fathers will Google Israelites. This guy pops up first. This dude was a murderer. It says 1970, Hulan Mitchell Jr., a.k.a. Yahweh ben Yahweh, established the nation of Yahweh, proclaimed himself God, the Son of God. Sound familiar that somebody's doing today? He and many of his followers were arrested for murder, racketeering, arson, and many other crimes to establish themselves in various states. He was found guilty of these crimes in 1991 and died of colon cancer in prison. Next. 1973, you had Moshe Ben Kareem, a.k.a. also known as Masha. He was chosen to carry on teaching in Abba Bivens' place. Bivens had died. Okay, he was fighting with the Muslims on the street because you had two groups that was teaching on the streets at this time. You had the Muslims. That's why if you look at the movie Malcolm X, remember you see Malcolm on a ladder teaching, and you got you had Sharpton playing a preacher.
Bobby Seale.
Right. So during that time, you also had Bivens was on the street teaching. They used to get into confrontations about the scriptures, and Bivens didn't play. He'd fight you quick. So the Muslims had beat him down real bad and put him in a hospital. In the hospital, he had set up Mashad and Yaakov to take over the teachings of the school, and Bivens had passed away. So I'm going to read this right here. 1973, Moshe Ben Kareem, a.k.a. Mashal, was chosen to carry on teaching in Abba Bivens' place, where Peter Sherrod, also known as Yaakov, that's Yaakov on the right, Mashal is in the green. It says they took over the Israeli school, adding UPK, Universal Practical Knowledge. Later in the 70s, they were helped by 5 other brothers, and they were called the Seven. They were offered, now this is the key point, they were offered several $1 million by the Rosicrucians to teach a more Christian or Jewish message of unity for all mankind, as some of the other Israelite camps teach. Masha and Yaakov refused, because they had given them,
we were there when they were doing this.
They had handed them a blank check and said, just write in whatever number you want, and it's yours. They said no, and gave it back to them. It says a Christian Jewish message means Negroes will remain on the bottom of society, and the full truth will never be taught. So now, we want to pause right there.